Amtgard Leadership University panel on the Circle of Knights and Knight Circle and all that stuff. I'm Tanath, I'm your moderator and host, and today we're going to talk to some Knights about their COKs. So we're going to start from left to right, say who you are, what kingdom you're out of, and something interesting about yourself, just real short, something interesting about your Knight Circle.
I'm Ausric. I come from the Nine Blades, which means that I'm Canadian. That's an interesting thing. Interesting thing about myself, I was the first Master Owl in Goldenvale in 10 years. So that was a thing, I guess.
Very interesting. Next.
I'm Promethea. I'm also from the Nine Blades, which means I'm from Goldenvale. That is not an interesting thing about me. I've been on a lot of ALU panels. That's an interesting thing about me. We're supposed to say an interesting thing about our Circle of Knights as well.
Sure.
We have a fairly active Circle of Knights, considering the fact that we don't have a lot of active Knights in play. Because our last vote was like 20 people, which was actually pretty good considering.
Yeah, all things considered, yeah. Most of those are inactive.
Next.
I'm Mesreth. I'm from the Desert Winds. I'm only going to say nice things about my Circle of Knights because, well, I work with these people.
If you need, I'll say.
You can say everything that I'm not allowed to say. Interesting thing, Utah is very far away from here. It's a 23-hour drive. It's lots of fun.
What's something interesting about you?
I have a title, the Overachiever.
All right then. Next.
Hey, I'm Grix, Iron Mountains. Our circle is actually real small. There's probably about 6 of us that are active, so all of our meetings are in person and kind of ad hoc. Interesting about me, I don't think I've ever played Amtgard east of Texas, which gives me some interesting perspectives on things.
I'm Shady. I'm from the Wetlands. Interesting thing about our circle is I believe we started the Knight Circle, approves the Knights and makes the new Knights instead of the Monarch. So that's the Wetlands version of that. And interesting thing about me is I'm a gentleman of leisure. You know?
All right, I'm going to start things off with the first question. This is going to be a very broad question. We kind of touched on this already. Just tell me in one sentence, tell me about your Knight Circle. One sentence. I don't know, give you a little bit to think. Give you a little bit to think. As soon as somebody's ready, go ahead.
One sentence about the Goldenvale Circle of Knights.
Well, technically you get 2 sentences.
Why? Because we have
2?
You first.
We have one sentence. Damn it. It's an interesting mix of very old Knights and very new Knights. Like there's a noticeable gap. That was 2 sentences. I'm sorry.
On the same note, it is very rare, despite what people outside the Circle of Knights think, that we have a voting clique in the Circle of Knights, because our Knights actually discuss things fairly in depth when somebody gets considered. So people think like it's people scheming to get people knighted or not knighted, but usually it's not. Usually it's like a random cross section of people who feel
I feel like every new candidate I get into a fight with.
One sentence.
One sentence. We work very hard to keep the Knights meetings to last only 4 to 6 hours.
That's it.
Sounds awful.
It used to be worse.
And you're the overachiever.
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm also one of the newest Knights on our circle.
Congratulations.
I think the Iron Mountains is in a kind of a weird spot. We're all really good friends, and with 1 or 2 exceptions to, opinions on things, we pretty much all agree on everything. So our Knight Circle meetings are usually just us informing, our Monarch sits on our panels, so our COK meetings are usually just us informing the Monarch of the opinion that we have, and not a whole lot of discussion.
The Wetlands Circle of Knights is interesting. We've been a kingdom for a fairly long time, and as Knights drift in and out of activity, the opinions change, and someone had mentioned cliques earlier or voting blocks, and with the Knight Circle making the Knights, that's always been an accusation, and there's been some truth behind that, but it's something that I feel like we're aware of, and being the people we are, in theory, Knights, good people, we're working on it.
All right, next question is, does your COK have requirements for knights above award standardization? If so, what are they?
Nothing concrete. I mean, we do have very extensive conversations about someone's moral compass and the stuff that's not able to be clear in the rules of play. But we don't have an extra requirement like you have to have a certain number of Wars of the Griffin for sword knights or anything like that.
That's true and not true about our Circle of Knights, though, because for Serpent in particular, there are definitely people who want you to say win another tournament before, a sword. So we don't really have warlord candidates. We haven't really had warlord candidates, but they have to teach before they would get a sword belt.
Yeah.
We have invisible requirements that aren't written down anywhere, but they're culturally accepted.
Things that we use as a measure but are not a requirement. We've definitely had Serpent Knights that are made that have not specifically won an Olympiad or have not specifically gone and won an interkingdom competition, but we do use those ideas as a measure of how valid somebody is, I think.
We do, but not in that sense, I think, of the question. We largely have a belief of knights being more than just requirements, but it's masterhood is the requirements, knighthood is an attitude, a dedication, a personality, lots of words to describe around what it is, but it's just something that everyone has kind of their own idea. And so that requirement in each person's mind is more of who they are, what kind of person they are, as far as candidates for knighthood after they've reached the ladder award requirements, or box tops, as like everyone likes to call it.
Yeah, the Iron Mountains isn't a big fan of the idea of skill beyond that of a master. We think that's actually a pretty ridiculous phrase, and that wording is contradictory. It doesn't belong in our rule book. So for us, it's kind of masterhood is once you're at that point, and as long as we all agree that masterhood makes sense and was earned, we don't really focus so much on skill. We focus more on character. And then we went ahead and added. We didn't think the rule book talked enough about character, so we went ahead and added a paragraph in our Corpora that talks about how knights should be experienced and should be, innovators and teachers and things like that. And so our above and beyond requirements are all just better ways to flesh out character.
So you touched on that briefly. What would the difference in your mind be between a master and a knight?
So I think, and a lot of my circle agrees with me, that a master is somebody that's really good in a particular area, but completely regardless of how approachable they are or how, in non-service areas, how helpful they might be or how willing they are to share their knowledge or their abilities to do so. Whereas a knight is, I think a knight's biggest job is to be an example. And so a master dragon is somebody that might be great at creating some really cool paintings or something, whereas a serpent knight is somebody that's out there encouraging the EMS environment and has an intimate knowledge of Amtgard, and they can sit there and guide the next people coming up.
Okay. Shade.
We definitely have extra standards more than the strict rulebook thing. The problem is those extra standards are equal in number to how many active knights we have at the meeting. They all have a different thing they're looking for, and that can be sometimes contradictory. It can be unfair at times. I admit that. As we've discussed with the masterhood, knighthood, I kind of look at it as two things. Sometimes there's a guy who's a knight who's looking to get his qualification, that way he can be acknowledged as a knight. Sometimes there's a master who needs to become a better person to be a knight. You have to have both.
Okay, makes sense. We're going to take an audience question here. What is the primary reason for refusing a candidate for knighthood? And I'm going to add the word typically at the end of that. What is the primary reason typically for refusing a candidate for knighthood? This one's serious. I meant somebody scrolling this out going, oh, really? Oh.
I don't know if there's a standard answer to that question. It's a per candidate basis, but based on everything I just said about how the IM views knighthood, it's almost always either activity or character. We've had a number of players that have been, eligible for knighthood, but maybe they're just event Amtgarders, and it's just we're not comfortable with that at that point. But usually, if we turn somebody down, we think they're awful people.
I think it's like you can sum it up as consistent underperformance. They don't attend enough. They don't engage in the things that you engage as knights, like teaching enough. They don't interact with people in a polite way enough.
They're not broadly active enough. Like we've denied people because they're only active at a local level.
Yeah, like we don't see anybody go like travel or do anything. Yeah, just like there are some basic things that I think we all kind of touched on about what we think knights should be, like have a good character and be active and be teachers and things like that. And if you're underperforming in any or all of those, probably that would be a reason.
It's interesting you say that because my gut reaction a second ago was that we don't knight people, it's usually because they're awful. And I immediately felt bad about saying that because that's probably not collectively true. But the Iron Mountains maintains a list of eligible candidates that we talk about every night's meeting, and there are definitely up and comers that we would knight when they get to that point. But I don't think there's anybody on our list that the Knight Circle doesn't have like real reservations about. So I don't think we have anybody. Like everything you said makes perfect sense. I just can't think of anybody in my kingdom that just a little bit more and you'll be there. It's usually kind of a hard no unless you make some real big life choices or life changes.
In our kingdom, there isn't really no one that we're going to say no to. Like the IM, we have a list that we maintain, and so I may start getting within 7 orders, for instance, for those that require it. We start talking about them, and that talking about them, we are sending that feedback back to those people, and that might be years before they even get to the qualifications. They may never get to the qualifications, but for those that are interested in that feedback is going back to them where they can improve, where the Knight Circle wants to see improvement. Bugs swatted.
There are a lot of bugs.
Try not to clap too much, but
It's attacking my eyes.
Yeah.
But when you are getting there, you have an idea. Now, whether the Knight Circle is, the individual knights feel like a certain person is not ready for whatever reason. They might give different reasons because they just don't feel like, well, go ahead and improve here, or we need to see more improvement here. But it's all about, we think that everyone has that potential. You just might not be there yet. This is where you can focus on to improve.
Okay.
We have had lots of candidates that as soon as they hit their qualifications, were not knighted right off the bat, but they went quite a while in some cases before they were knighted, with feedback each time and build and so forth.
I'm going to piggyback that question and say, okay, so you just no voted or you hit the pause button on somebody for not necessarily because they're a terrible person, but because they have some growing to do or there's some feedback they need. Who delivers that feedback?
Usually, in our kingdom anyway, it's usually the sponsor. Most people, by the time they get to that point, they've been squired to somebody. It's very, very rare that you have somebody that is not belted in some way to a knight in our kingdom. That doesn't mean that's not the case, but
It's just because Matt is the only person I can think of in our kingdom.
and so usually it's going to be their knight that
Okay.
will send that information back as part of the mentoring process. If it is someone that's not necessarily belted, though, usually they have friends at that point, but somebody gets assigned to pass that information.
Okay.
So it's
a
officially our GMK that does
yeah, I
it.
was gonna say, like, for us, the default is the GMK.
That's
If
it.
they
There's only
don't
like
have a
6 of
knight
us, so
representative.
we pretty quickly just gotta tell people things.
For a new player whose ultimate goal is to become a knight, what early steps would you recommend to further that goal?
Do not want to become a knight. That is not the reason. It's cool to want to be a knight, and I think that's a really good, like the ideal of being a knight is really important to strive for. But if you work to become a knight and think about stuff as box tops, like you were saying, think about it as box tops, by the time you get to like, I'm not obviously speaking from personal experience, by the time you get to 8, you'll be super miserable if you stop getting awards, but you continually put out what you think is good quality work, but maybe people don't think is improvement or innovation. Or if you go to be a knight with the goal of being a knight, you will probably get to a point where somebody will be super miserable with your life and be like,
You're gonna have a bad time.
and you're gonna feel entitled, and that makes it hard, and then it makes everything kind of shitty for you.
I actually legitimately
Makes it-
try to talk people out of it.
Yeah.
Every candidate we've had come up in the last 2 years, I've tried to talk them out of being a knight.
One of my good friends recently got qualified, and I didn't vote yes on him at the first meeting because I hadn't talked to him yet, and he's a busy guy. He's got a lot going on in his life, and Knighthood, at least the way that I've been taught, and the way I try and handle myself, whether I'm successful, I thought he might want some downtime before he stepped into a new role, So I was like, let me talk to him first before I throw him under the bus.
And the thing that that Dustin and I have talked about is the concept that we really undervalue masters also. Masterhoods are so important, and you can keep getting masterhoods after you're a knight of something, and there are masterhoods that don't need to belt. And we don't stop to appreciate the fact that you got to be, you're identified as a master in your kingdom in a specific skill set. That's a huge deal. So if you think of it that way, I want to be recognized as the top, like Paragon shit. I want to be recognized as the top of my game at one thing. That's I think that's great to strive for. With the icing that if you want to be a knight because you like the idea of it, the concept of it, you can then do that once you have a ladder of master.
Right. It's don't want the title knight. What you should strive for is to be a person that can be recognized in that manner.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you want to act in that way. You want to contribute in those ways. And it's just as long as you it's okay to want to be a knight as long as what you're looking for is to be the person that can be called that and not just the title.
Yeah.
That's very important.
I actually somewhat disagree with everyone here on this. It's in line, but from a different thought process. My recommendation to people is have fun with the game.
I was going to address that.
Rather than, if you want to be a knight, it's something to strive for. By the time you get to the point that you're even getting close, you're not striving for that much. You've figured out things. But a lot of people want knighthood because they want recognition. And by the time you get anywhere close, you're already being recognized for what you're doing in the game anyway, and that motivation isn't necessarily a big deal anymore.
So the obvious challenge is then why have knighthood?
It's still a recognition. Don't get me wrong.
It's a holdover from where we came from.
No, why have knighthood is because the job of knights is to be examples, and we have knighthood so that new players, we get realistically, it's something Mesreth says whenever we talk about knighting somebody new, and his litmus test is, do we want 10 more of that person at the park? And if the answer is yes, then yeah, we should probably knight that person. If the answer is no, then, we need to figure out why. And the great thing about knighthood is you get to say, it's really obvious. We put a big symbol on all of these people that we think you should, emulate on some level.
Yeah, you represent our game. The way that I always think about it is if someone's going to be knighted, am I
You're effectively
comfortable-
ambassadors to the mundane.
Yeah.
Well, basically, yeah. Would I be comfortable with this person doing an interview for a large media company on behalf of Amtgard?
I always think of it as if this person goes to another kingdom and represents themselves the way they would normally represent themselves, or am I going to hear from that kingdom a week later hey, I came down, it was terrible to everyone.
Why are you giving this person a knighthood?
Yeah.
I'd like to address the seeking knighthood, not seeking knighthood thing. I don't try to discourage people from wanting to be a knight or wanting to be a master or a paragon or anything. My advice after everything I've done in the game is only do what you enjoy. If you don't enjoy, doing this or doing that, don't do it for the award. Now, some people strive for the awards, and that's what they enjoy. So go ahead and do that. I'm not saying don't do that. But if it's not for you, just go out and have fun, This is what we do this is our leisure time, no sense in being miserable on your off time.
I can speak for myself and maybe you guys. We don't actually get paid to be knights, so
You don't?
I'm good, actually.
My summary would be understand what knighthood is.
Yeah.
Quite simply, make sure you understand.
And talk to knights.
Yeah.
Every knight's gonna have a different opinion on what knighthood means.
Yes.
When somebody new gets knighted, I hope it's the same in everybody else's kingdom. That you tell them something we often we give them advice, or they ask us for specific advice. So in the case of the most recent night we had, asked us specific questions that they thought would be pertinent, that we could answer. And a lot of people are surprised by the kind of not negative, but I've been burnt kind of responses that you get, and those are the best because those are people actually sharing experiences that you will encounter instead of being oh, it's cool. And you get to wear spurs, and you get to sit up at the front during knightings, but people talking about actual experiences that you will likely encounter. That's really valuable. And you should be able to approach a knight in your kingdom and be hey, what's it like, and get an actual answer.
This first person.
I've not experienced any of those things as a knight.
We have a lot
Lots
of
of work.
conversations.
That's what I've experienced.
We have a lot of conversations on our board about like how this person will now be someone's first night. The first like any new player who's going to meet this person, but they're going to be their first night.
Can I explain?
That's a
that
big
concept?
thing.
Can I
Sure, go
explain
ahead.
that
Yeah.
concept? So, the big one that we share is like, so like everybody in the audience probably remembers the first night that they met or like spent like a decent amount of time talking to at an event.
They were
But-
awful.
Right. And so the first night I met, I was lucky enough to meet Sir Blackhawk, which is actually in Bone a lot of people's first night because of how long he'd been playing.
Yeah.
And he was such a good example of knighthood, and he had at the time free belts and was really kind to everyone and was always helping out. And that left a huge impression on me about what knighthood should be. And we tell our new knights that you should think about how you're going to be somebody's first knight, which is a hilariously upsetting concept when somebody brings it up to you. It's very upsetting, but it's always in the back of your mind when you meet somebody new that like, man, even if I'm really upset right now, maybe I should be at least neutral and nice, like as nice as I can be to this person because this could be the first impression.
Yeah.
And that I think that frightens a lot of people, but I think it's in a good way.
I think that's a good thing. Unfortunately, it's on some levels it's a responsibility of a knight. Sometimes I don't necessarily want to put on the white belt and I'm not feeling approachable, but I know this is the position I've taken. And when I'm out there, this is what I do. So it's hard sometimes, but if someone comes up to you, especially a newer player or something, you're representing the game, you're representing your kingdom, not only that, you want the game to be better. It's not about how you look, it's about everyone having a better time. And sometimes you have to take a step back for the betterment of the game,
I'm going to redirect back to night circles because that's supposedly what we're talking about. We're going to put Shady on the spot here. What are your thoughts on the wetlands model? The circle makes the knights, not the monarch. And we'll let Shady go last, and we're going to start left to right again.
We have a very specific reason why we might want that in Golden Bell right now.
We've had a few like either very close votes on knighthood where like it's like a 50-50 split, and we've had a couple like where the vast majority is no, and because ours is monarch only and monarch or all thing can strip belts, sometimes the circle of knights input sometimes it doesn't matter, like even in a good way. Like sometimes we don't really say much about a knight, but like they're a pretty okay person and they'll be a good knight, and so the monarch just knights them anyway. So that model is honestly kind of like for me would be kind of exciting because we would have we're made up of so many different like political groups that like if everybody agreed on a candidate, that would be a really good night.
Yeah.
And if we all disagreed on a candidate, they're probably not going to be a very good night because we've all had bad experiences. Like nobody you encounter should have universally bad experiences with a person. I would love that model or a combination model like that. And I think it's really, really good. I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, you mentioned combination model. I think the model I would appreciate the most is you have to have monarch approval, but you also have to have approval from the COK. Like I think that bridge would be ideal in my opinion.
In our kingdom, the monarch attends the knights' meetings, and while it is the monarch that does the knighting and the circle does the recommendation, I don't have a real strong opinion as far as I'm aware, neither does our circle. Real strong opinion either way on either. It's very, very, very rare that the monarch is going to go against what the circle voted, and the only instances that I know of that was the case, it was not like it was a one-sided vote. It was almost split, very, very close type of vote anyway. But in almost no cases will the monarch go against the knight circle anyway, just because, but they're in the meetings, they're aware, they have their own opinions. As I said, me personally, not a lot of opinion one way or the other. But I haven't experienced an issue where I need to see one.
Maybe something to discuss just a little further is what purpose does it serve for the monarch to make the knight versus the circle to make the knight? What are the pros and cons of each?
I think the big benefit to that is that in some areas, I think usually older areas, sometimes the COK is seen as a group of people that just is, there for life, and if you can't bring somebody new in, you can't change opinions and things like that. And so the Iron Mountains is a big fan of the Iron Mountains is a big fan of letting the monarch have final say, because if we can't convince the monarch that somebody shouldn't be a knight, then maybe somebody new should come in, and if they, fail horribly, then it's some work for all of us to correct things. But at the end of the day, there needs to be a way for somebody to come in and shake things up if there really are problems. It makes sense what Mesreth said, because the Desert Winds was an Iron Mountains group, but I think that a lot of their original knights, came from the Iron Mountains, and so it makes sense that we do things the same way. But we have the same idea that nobody really goes against. A couple knightings ago, we actually voted. It was not yet on a candidate, and we were like, they could use a couple more months. But if you want to, go for it. And the monarch opted to do it, and we're all really happy about it. And glad that it happened. That's the only time I can think of that the monarch has gone away from what the COK said.
Well, we famously gave back a belt that was stripped in another kingdom, and that was, I think, something like a 40-60 split or something. It was surprisingly close, and the monarch did it anyway, despite 60% no. Wow. And that was I think the turning point at which we we have there are knights in the Nine Blades who are exemplary knights, who are majority no voted, but are perfect, they're perfect examples of knights. They're wonderful people. But once we realized that monarchs could put in somebody who'd had their belt stripped in a neighboring kingdom, we were that.
You guys had an entire fighting company that did that for somebody that got stripped in our kingdom.
So that's actually an excellent segue to this next question. Is there ever discussion in your COK of removing a knight's belt? Maybe we can leave out specifics, but how does that, if so, or even if not, but there's something in place, how does that process work?
We've removed at least one belt in the last 6 months. It's been a busy year for me, but
Got a few more on the table.
it's just hard to remember everything that was this year. But a lot of older Amtgard was a little more rough and tumble, and we're slowly coming out of that in Texas into a more friendly, open, family-friendly game to an extent. And it's a hard adjustment to an extent, and some people don't meet the requirements anymore, or just make mistakes. The guy I'm speaking of, I won't name names, I think fairly highly of. I was actually complimenting him earlier that night. I woke up the next morning, I heard what he did, and I'm like, it's gonna be hard to defend you, buddy. I don't have a lot to work with here, but I think a lot of knights are scared of the belt stripping, which I find almost offensive. If you think you're a knight, you should be able to at any time be held accountable and be willing to be judged as a knight. But I'm going off on that one. So because people are afraid to start with the belt stripping, we've been very subtle on, the guy that lost his belts, he was like, I'm not a knight anymore. So we didn't have any string official meeting or anything, but it's done. We're trying to work out the process.
Did he just drop his belt and the circle was a part of it, or was there
He dropped his belt. He officially announces that he dropped his belt. The circle said, okay, done. We have a meeting coming up. I think we're going to vote to confirm it officially, but the matter's on it. It's done.
Anyone else have a stripping that happened recently?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, we didn't have a stripping, but there was talk of and recommendation. In the Desert Winds, it is very specifically laid out how stripping works, and it's a process. It's not an instant thing. It's not something that can just knee-jerk and whatnot. But the Knight Circle will make a recommendation and then recommend it to the monarch. The monarch can then, based on that recommendation, make an all thing to put to the populace for the stripping. The populace is actually who will do the stripping.
Oh wow! So it has to pass the Knight Circle first,
then
the monarch, then the populace.
Doesn't have to put the all thing forward to do that. So it is a process, and in the end, it was not put forward to the all thing, and instead it's being dealt with differently because new information came along.
Okay.
And whatnot. I'm not going to go further into that, but there is a very clear process, and ultimately it's in the hands of the populace.
We had a
Yeah, go ahead.
we had a scenario where we indefinitely banned a member of our COK, and we had no process on our Corpora for how to strip a night spell. So that was basically a conversation where I had to talk. I was monitoring at the time, and I had to talk to him and say, "Hey, you need to drop this so that we don't have to awkwardly invent a procedure for this." And he said, "Okay." And then when we rewrote our Corpora recently, we included a procedure, and it's a similar. It doesn't require all those checks. The monarch has to agree, regardless of which path you take. But it's either the monarch and a simple majority of the COK, or the monarch and a super majority of the populace. So either an all thing or the COK can do it, but the monarch still has to agree. But that's been kind of interesting because we've had a couple of instances lately where we've discussed one of our knights is not very active anymore, and a few of us think he shouldn't be, and that goes back and forth. But there's a weird concern that if the COK does the stripping, it's not going to be looked at favorably because of friendships and things like that. So our COK is kind of requesting that we don't do it and push it to the all thing. So there's some weird things that can happen, when you set up those.
The wetlands also has a fairly straightforward process of how to do it, and also ultimately it's in the hands of the populace. The strip tonight can appeal to the populace, and if the all thing majority says no, you're a good guy, you're back in. But it normally doesn't come to that, like I said, because it's just more comfortable for everybody to have an agreement and not go through the process. We don't necessarily want a big drama-filled all thing.
It sounds like, other than maybe the one exception you just mentioned, usually to have a belt strip, there has to be some kind of grievous offense. Somebody did something terrible. It's not like, well, they're not really active anymore.
Which is ridiculous.
I've been seeing it more often recently. So like last year, last 2 years, it's come up way more than it has in the last, I don't know how many years since I played Amtgard.
We're also in a weird spot where, I've had a lot of conversations online about what Knighthood should be. We talk about the character opponent, things like that, and it feels like a lot of the newer kingdoms are on board with that. And I've had older kingdoms respond to me, members, COK members from other kingdoms, just go, "Who cares about character? Why do you care that much? And why?" That's what happens. Is we have these young idealists and people a couple of the Texas kingdoms have popped up. I couldn't tell you who and where, but they popped up and just yeah, but this person did these great things. Why would you take that honor away from them? It's like, oh, well, they're jerks and they're mean to people, and why should they represent us?
I think Amtgard has been changing in the last few years, and we're actually, asking and demanding and expecting, what knights should be, and more from those people rather than the good old boys club, and how many people have looked at the Knight Circle. I know that a lot of people looked at that when I was first joining the game, that the Knight Circle was not just Knight Circle, but Knights in general is more the good old boys club than anything else. And I see that
I
changing.
think that's some of the concern what Shady mentioned earlier about some of the older knights just being afraid of belt strippings and stuff, and I think it's because our use for knighthood has changed over the years, and the people that we recognized before, I think that was when the game was more of a focus on skill beyond that of a master, as opposed to masterhood plus good character and all the other things.
This is good stuff, folks. Our use for knights have changed. It's good stuff.
I think that's accurate.
Well, it's solid, and it's definitely a thing I agree to. I haven't been around as long, but I definitely agree, yeah.
Do you feel monarchs who disagree with COK consensus, does that have, well, I'll ask it more broadly. Why do you think typically that monarchs and COKs who disagree, what's that disconnect?
Old boys club. They think that there's a political climate in the COK that's against somebody that they believe very strongly has a knightly character. And that's problematic too, because it can happen that you want to, like the example I was saying before, one of our friends got a majority no when he came up, but it's probably one of the best examples of a knight that I can think of. And the monarch did it anyway because it was, in their mind, the right thing to do. So it can be that the COK is incorrect, or maybe incorrect in the long run, but also there's the disconnect is there's no trust. They don't trust the Knight Circle to make the right decision. So when the monarch is somebody who is a knight or who's in the belted family of a knight or who knows knights really well, they take knight's judgment, I think, a bit more strongly than if there's a personal disconnect between the circle of knights and the monarch. I think there's more likely to be a knighting that goes a way that nobody's expecting.
I think that that's part of it. I think that there's more, whereas when you're a knight, you start looking and thinking of things differently. And when you're not, you're looking at things and thinking very differently as well. A lot of our monarchs are not necessarily knights. They have a different perspective on things, and as much as we hate to admit it, we as knights are looking at things from a certain point of view. We don't always take other points of view into perspective. We have certain ideas in place, but sometimes our ideas are not necessarily everybody's ideas.
I think it's important to realize as knights, this is a privilege, true. You know, I get to wear a chain and a very nice belt, but it's a responsibility as well. And what I think is best and what I want is not necessarily what is best for the kingdom or what the kingdom wants. You know, and it's what I like about the wetland system, and increasingly I think other kingdoms are as well, is it's largely the circle of knights that makes the discussion, but the monarch has a veto power. So both the monarch and the circle of knights have to agree. And you get a lot of the old boy circle of knights, that's true. But a lot of the monarchs tend to be new, up and coming, big park, bopped up. You know, they got all these votes, and they're newer. So I really like, you get a fresh perspective from the monarch, and he's like, I was looking at this, I think about it a lot, but it's hard to get the perspective on value of quality or skill or understanding when you've been playing for 2 years and you're like, this is the best guy I've ever seen. And I'm like, well, I've been playing for 20 and he's not, you know? And that's an important connect to make.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think we run into that too, where it feels like players that have been in less than about 5 years tend to be the ones recommending the people that the COK doesn't think are ready, and it seems to be a disconnect with how we all communicate with each other.
Okay.
I want to step further on this. We have seen, and it has come up, and I'm sure that you guys have probably seen it, but we've seen it where the Knight Circle has built up an idea of knighthood into a standard that they themselves are not meeting. And they are, and this is where you get some of those disconnects where they're looking for a standard that they themselves don't meet, and they're saying this new person is not meeting this, well, standard that's not really even a possibility. And then you have to question. That was actually a thing that was cropping up in our circle to some degree in the last few years, that as people kind of reevaluated in the circle and like, wait a minute, what are we doing?
So on that point, if there is a disconnect, let's say between the monarch and the Knight Circle, is that disconnect? Where's the populace, the general Amtgard? Where do they usually fit in? Is it usually that they agree with the monarch and it's the Knight Circle that's sandbagging? Is it the other way around?
Honestly, at least in our kingdom, people care a lot about in the populace that care about it are going to usually be up and comers, some of your more newer movers and shakers within the kingdom, but a lot of people just don't care at all. They don't care about the politics. They're there just to play the game. And they're like, oh, well, someone else just got an award. Great. I'm going to go hit people. But of those people who do care, everybody's got their own thing. Everyone's got their own opinions based on their experiences with that individual. So,
I'm going to ask a general knighthood question. Once a knighthood is acquired, is it relatively easier, relatively more difficult, about the same to get a second knighthood in a different order once your qualifications are met?
I have opinions on this.
Let's hear it.
I'm going to go right off there. I am of the opinion that because knighthood is about character and personality, you're a knight or you're not a knight. So if you've reached the qualifications for a different track to knighthood, and you're already a knight, did you all of a sudden become not a knight anymore, so you can't get this other belt?
You're saying how it should be. What's the reality of right now?
Well, and I'm saying that's my opinion on it, and we have had in the past, and this is again that part of what we're talking about, that unrealistic standard, where they want to make them wait. They want to make a new thing or requal or something like that, and I'm like, they're a knight or they're not a knight. If they're a knight and they're in the circle, give them the other belt. They earned it. if they're not anymore, why are they still in the circle?
Yeah, I think there's 3 categories of knights. It's knights that are actively doing good knight things and should obviously, yes, still be knights. There are knights that did a bunch of great things but don't have the time right now. Those are the people you don't give the next belt to because, well, they're just not around at the moment, but they're still absolutely knightly. And those are the people that have fallen off, which you should just take their belt. But I can use myself as an example because I think as the last group that you should just take my belt. I can use myself as an example for the timing of all of it because when I was given my first belt 3 years ago, I was asked if I wanted Serpent or Crown, and I said, "Oh, well, Serpent's always been my passion. If you're going to let me choose, I choose that one." At Rackus this year, I was recognized as a Flame Knight and still qualified for Crown, and they went, "Oh, we're going to give you a Flame Belt." "Oh, what about Crown?" "Well, I mean, when's the last time you were in office?" Funny story, I was in office right then. But I wasn't in Imperial office. But there was just a weird fallout where 3 years ago they thought I was deserving of a thing. They don't think I was any less deserving of it. They thought I was more deserving of something else. And it seems to be tied into tradition where there's a need to space things out. And then in the middle of that, it gets really murky because everybody's like, well, what have you done for me lately?
I think Grix is right on that, especially with the what have you done for me lately. Amtgard is, for better or for worse, very much a what have you done for me lately game. That's how it is. But with the 3 kinds of knights, the ones that are actively pushing it, and then you give them the second belt. The ones that, did a bunch of good work but aren't active anymore. And that's really where I think the second and third or even fourth belt comes in, at least the discussion and voting in our circle is, this guy's eligible for his second belt, but has he done anything exciting lately? Is he pushing that? Is he representing that aspect of the belt, or did he just qual and he just keep doing his old thing? It's very much a window of time. Did he do a big event recently, and then we hold the meeting? Oh, he's fresh. You
guys know what the solution to this is, right? I've only posted about it 1,000 times. We collapse all the orders of knighthoods into one. We put master on the same level, and we make them equally important. And then knighthood is a character award, and masterhood is a mastery award.
I mean, you could give out second, third, and fourth belts in a newsletter. I mean, that's a possibility.
To go back,
That's also a Wetlands thing.
to go back to your question, we just asked them if they think they're qualified, and in the 2 that have come in the last 2 years, they both went nope, and we went great, and that was it.
Oh wow!
That was the whole conversation.
That makes it easy. Okay.
Because you're asking. You can ask that in front of the populace in terms. You ask them in a circle of your peers, and you're like, "Do you think you deserve that second belt?" They have to be able to confidently say to the people who are about to vote to them, "Yeah, they do."
Do you have a follow-up conversation though with why they don't think they're qualified?
It's so far they just told us.
Sometimes that comes with the answer.
Fair enough. I guess it just seems weird because I'm also of the opinion that if you fall into knighthood category 1, you're an active knight that's contributing, why wouldn't you be qualified for that second belt? And I had this conversation because I was in the COK meeting when they said, "Do you want a second belt?" And I went, "Oh."
The reason for that, I think, in our specific situation is that a lot of the secondary belts that we get are crown. And we have a lot of conversations on our COK as well about whether the masterhood was valid. Because we do have something that valid masterhood.
I guess I was coming from a place of assuming that
The mayor of the qualification.
Right, but in the crown situation, there is no
Crowns
masterhood. So if someone has fulfilled the number of terms of office,
right.
but that last 2 or 3
Well,
terms
and there's
were
no
not
paper
great.
record that says whether or not it was good, whether it was qualified.
It says excellence.
We track that. So our night circle, we track all of those because there's a vote every 6 months after people done their office, and the night circle votes whether or not that was an excellent.
Speak up just a touch.
Tracked. Sorry.
That's a good way to do it.
Do you do that for every duchy, every kingdom office? Do you have principalities? You do that? Oh wow.
I mean, well, how many Parks on the Desert wins? Half a dozen? Oh, really?
That's still really cool.
You jump in real quick, folks. We're in our 15-minute warning, so if you have some more questions to you want to ask, you want to fill out a little
we have a spreadsheet.
ticket and bring them in.
Of course, that's what you.
Yeah, they have a spreadsheet, and it just gets tracked for ratings of excellence, and
Love that.
that's what's there. But so it doesn't come
I'm gonna leave you guys to talk about that after the meeting, if you'd like. Next question is, does your COK do anything beyond voting on knights or stripping belts?
We're starting to. We got feedback through our GMK that the knights that they had met had been hostile, unpleasant, unknightly, and it was knights from different areas. But like a knight came to my park, and a bunch of us were like, "We went to that park because we didn't go to that park." It was basically a was it me scenario to try to figure out if we could fix it. And we started talking about how we really need to get our shit together and do more stuff. Although I will say we did something together lately. At least 9 of us did, and that was nice.
It was nice.
But yeah, we need to do more unified stuff. I think it would be good. I think that if you get general populace feedback that your circle of knights unilaterally is bad, then you need to do something. So we're trying. There was talk about like running some feasts and maybe trying to put an event together as knights and like seeing if we could pull stuff off.
We rarely do anything as a group. Occasionally we talk about it, and then like one guy spearheads it, and everybody else falls through. Which it is what it is.
Like I was saying, in our meetings, we're talking about everybody that's basically 7th, 8th, up and coming. They get talked about, things that they can improve on that the Knight Circle wants them to see, but then we're also talking about reigns of excellence, so that can be recorded. And as I said from the very beginning, we're working very hard to keep the meeting linked down to 4 to 6 hours. We come up with some interesting things like putting alcohol sitting there, but we can't have it until the meeting's over.
That would not fly.
Wouldn't it?
I think there's a couple other things we discussed, but they all involve COK stuff. So Casca recently wrote a code of ethics that we've been workshopping a little bit that we'll eventually ask the populace to pass, and then we'll probably eventually ask the Circle of Monarchs to pass with the rule book. We've talked about having public meetings and just other ways to get other people involved and fix perceptions. But it's still all COK things.
Yeah.
We've never really treated the COK as a service household to go run feast or anything.
We don't do that. We've started various different projects that to be able to like open questions for people. We're going to do ask the Knight Circle, whatever. Put together some collegiums or other things. So we have various different projects of things that we want to see happen to improve the kingdom, improve this or that, and people will spearhead it from within the Knight Circle, and then we go and do that. So that is some other things as well.
Does your COK conduct votes and business electronically, in person, both?
Both.
Neither?
Almost exclusively electronically.
Mostly in person. Occasionally there's some electronic, but it's not very common.
It's usually a vote in the COK
So
group.
typically electronically.
Entirely
Electronically only. Typically in person only.
Mostly it's in person at the 6-month meeting. Yeah.
Ours is theoretically in person, but anyone who's active and qualified who can't make it can electronically sign in or
It's kind of
proxy the
hybrid.
votes or
I
something.
know,
Okay.
I know what the difference is. I can't recall the last time I had a Circle of Knights meeting that wasn't 5 nights. Even though we just, like I said earlier, there are like 20 of us active because we are split across a border.
Okay.
And like driving end to end is something like 18 hours or something. To like to go from like Sudbury or Ottawa, it's like go all the way out to the kingdom. What used to be the kingdom seats really far. So we have all of our meetings online. We probably should do like more like Discord meetings and stuff.
Yeah, we talked about doing Skype and Discord or something.
We do all of our meetings online, so it makes sense that all of our voting's electronic. We don't meet in person.
Yeah, we
So
do
you guys have a big distance issue, and that's why you do it online.
Yeah.
Why would you say that you do all yours in person?
Mostly because that's what has been done. Our kingdom is massively huge. Across it's 12 hours, 13, 14 hours. I mean, we go from the top of Montana all the way down to Las Vegas. But most of our knights are still located more core, and so they can get together. It's not to say that we couldn't do electronic, it's just hasn't come up. We have had people attend by Skype a few times when they couldn't make the meeting in person, but primarily I think that's just more of that's the way it's been.
I mean, that's our setup. We have, at the moment, we have one active knight that doesn't live in Denver. So it's really easy, and we Skype that. We allow that person to Skype in. Their work schedule usually doesn't match up with our night meetings anyway. When Rivermore was still part of, and I assume Desert Winds was too back then, but I wasn't around for that. But when Rivermore was still part of the Iron Mountains, there was a couple nights out there that would Skype in or send an email or something. But all the discussion happened in person. Usually in somebody's living room. And
How does your kingdom handle? These things are killing me. How does your kingdom handle abstaining votes?
Abstaining is kind of on our Circle of Knights. If you were to get a decent amount of yes, like not a majority yes, but a pile of abstains, we would actually assume that person was probably knightly character, and there was some like personal disagreements, or like we're like, well, they're not to my standards, but if everybody else thinks they're up to their standards, that's pretty okay.
We see that a lot with candidates that we just don't have a lot of familiarity with. Like, if, for instance, like if the Canadian Knights are all abstains, but we're talking about a person who plays the GVP or even south of there, that we just haven't had the opportunity to have met, and then had like conversations with, then we just abstain on them.
You can. There's like an informal formal voting process. So when somebody comes up with masterhood, usually there's like a certain length of time. I think our bylaws say a specific amount of time.
A year.
A year? No, but like to come up for discussion pre-vote can just happen as soon as you get masterhood. We've been doing that lately.
I think that it's
When people come up for master, when people come up for discussion, a lot of the time you'll put a thing and you'll put a vote in, even though it's not like the real vote, and then they'll call a vote and you can change your vote at that point. And we've had that happen where like we've been like, no, I wouldn't vote this person in, and then 6 months go by before the king goes, oh yeah, I actually want to knight this person now, do it again, and then if your opinion's changed in 6 months, you can say yeah or no, because you want to do it.
Our knights are very opinionated. They generally don't abstain. If they did, it was because of some kind of conflict or something like that. And they treat them the same way that it gets treated for any kind of all-thing vote. It's basically as though you didn't vote. It doesn't count against or for or anything. It's not even factored in as part of percentages. So.
I'm pretty sure the only time we have abstentions is when somebody was too busy to make the meeting anyway, and if they abstain because they trust the circle to make whatever decision they need to. Otherwise, they would have mailed in a vote or something like that.
Okay.
The wetlands actually has fairly complicated voting procedures about quorum and pass-fail and how an abstain counts. We've got a rule about knights who are active but don't want to count towards the voting. It's very complicated. I'm not sure why a lot of other people abstain. You know, I've never asked them. Me personally, it's either unlikely that I just haven't come across them in their time, or I have a personal issue with them, but I know it's a personal thing, so I trust them. I know I'm too close to it, and I can't be trusted to be clear-headed, so I trust my other knights to make a good decision.
It's like that's problematic for me as like an emotional person. Is like when I feel that I have a bad emotional experience with somebody, that can leave an impression on me for years. And I'll listen to other people who've had experiences, but if my gut still says when I see that person, like I don't want to touch that person, I don't want to talk to that person, I wouldn't let that person come up to me, then even if they've done a good job, I'll abstain on the grounds of I can't trust the way that I feel versus the way all these other people feel. But I need everybody to understand that I think this person has a good body of work, but I don't like them and I would never like them. And I think that is where abstains can't, like, even if you count, even if you don't, like, you don't count them, I think that's fine. But at the same time, like, you need to have, I think there should be leeway for people to say, I love this person as a person, but they're not qualified, or I hate this person as a person, but you guys can knight them if you want, and because you could be in the majority, or the minority rather.
Well, but I think that's why you vote no.
Yeah.
Because theoretically the number should work out.
Yeah.
If everybody else agrees.
Well, we just talked about how. No, I guess I can see it that way. I don't agree, but I guess I can see it that way.
Yeah. That's my perspective.
Yeah.
I also don't see a scenario where I would ever abstain on anybody because my kingdom's very small. So, and even when we had, Rivermore as part of us, it was still easy for me. Like, I didn't get to go there very often, but it was easy enough for me to talk to people and have an opinion. And so I think that, it's the job of the people. We used to talk a lot in the Iron Mountains about how people in our principality needed to make themselves visible, and they get upset that they had to put it on this work. And I usually make the argument that, well, it's also our job to go find them. You have to meet in the middle somewhere.
Meet in the middle, for
and
sure.
so I think if you're abstaining because you don't know somebody, either you probably don't have the attendance that it looks like you have, or you should be able to have some sort of
That's what
opinion.
I was saying earlier. Like, if
So-
I'm abstaining on somebody because I don't know them, based on the amount I travel, that's probably their fault. And it's not always, but
Sure.
I travel a lot, So if I don't know you, or if you never leave the kingdom or your park or whatever, I can't help you.
So we got.
I'm also aware that if my travel drops down, that's on me.
5 minutes, 5 panelists. Each of you, for this last question, has 1 minute to turn this into your personal soapbox about the COK in your kingdom. Go.
Oh, balls.
All right. Well, okay. actually proud of the level of communication that our Circle of Knights has had since I've become a knight, and there are a couple of knights in here. Is it better now than it was before?
Well, I don't know. When I was first night, I was quiet, so.
Is it better now, Katie?
I would say it's better now than it was.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Because
It's
I've only
definitely
been a knight for like a little bit over a year.
I think the deciding factor in that is a lot of the knights that had been around before. Like I talked about, like the gap between the old knights and the new knights.
Yeah.
A lot of those older knights have officially retired and they are no longer speaking.
Yeah.
So it makes it easier for those of us who are still active in traveling and communicating, and also are younger and therefore better at communicating online.
I guess that is kind of weird. Like in our kingdom, once you get to a certain point and once you acknowledge that you no longer play Amtgard, you actually don't generally speak on the circle. Like you just don't. So you don't get, except for like I think Amren recently just appeared. And we all like freaked out.
He's always lurking. Like the GT Knights, they're always lurking. Fits and.
Oh, they're there. They're aware. They just don't say anything
Yeah.
until it's like really important for them or something.
I think that one thing that I would like to see, because our communication is so high, is I would love to see public knights meetings with the caveat, and in a couple of knightings, and since I become a knight, a little before I became a knight, there were some things that were said in those people's discussion threads, which were like people having a hard time admitting things that needed to be said, but they were like, I'm comfortable admitting these to you guys, but I won't say this in front of anybody else, and the monarch. And I worry that if we have public meetings, one of two things will happen. If the populace is allowed to speak, it'll turn into like, because we come from a tire fire kind of kingdom right now, it would be completely up in flames immediately, and that's horrible for everybody involved. Or people would withhold stuff, and that would be really terrible because you want honest feedback on a candidate, and you want to be able to give that candidate honest feedback, but you don't want that honest feedback to be front.
Well, and I
2 minutes up. Your turn.
No, I'm gonna jump in here.
Go ahead, jump in,
Grix.
Grix.
For this. We had the same problem because we had a meeting 3 meetings ago, and I said, guys, let's make this public, and then immediately went, guys, let's not make this public. And the thing in my head wasn't that I was afraid we wouldn't talk about the right things. I mean, I think our idea was we wouldn't let the populace talk, we would talk. But my concern is, what happens when, Shady's an up-and-comer and he wants to come to the thing, and I have some really awful stories about Shady, maybe, and it's not fair. He didn't ask. Mesreth said, let's knight Shady, and now I have to tell Mesreth in public why we can't knight Shady.
Yeah.
And that's not fair to Shady at all. And so there's some concerns like that I worry about. Our COK is great.
1 minute, go.
Yeah, our COK is great. I know I like our COK. I like the people that are there. For better or worse, no one is perfect, and everybody's learning and growing. And sometimes we get stuck in our ways, and then we realize that we're stuck in our ways, and then we open up and look at growing more and rethinking things, looking at things from a different perspective. We've had a lot of new knights add to our COK, while at the same time we've had some of our older knights become less active and not play as much and not participate as much. It's brought new perspectives and new ways of looking at things.
I'm going to cut you off there. Shady, 1 minute. Your own personal soapbox.
First, I just want to say I'm a wetlander. I'm proud to be a wetlander. I love my kingdom. Being recognized as a knight there is a very big honor to me. I understand that everyone has a troubled past. I have a troubled past. I'm sure you do. I don't know. But but in the time I've been paying attention, the time I've been active in it, I've seen nothing but improvement and positive growth in what we're doing as a kingdom, both as the populace, the officers, and as the knights. The one thing I wanted to say about it's not fair to like public meetings, I think the most important thing we need to do is transparency with our candidates. Like I said, we have like 19 different opinions of what they need to do, so they need to know what they are. But it's also very hard to get brought up every 6 months with, even if you have no interest in it, and then the night's meeting is secret, but you know what the result is. You're going to get a call one way or another. So every 6 months you're like, oh yeah, they had a meeting and said I was a bad person. That's what we need to work on.
That was my entire experience at Dragonspine.
Folks,
I had to deal with that for 4 years.
Please, can I have a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you, guys.